Hey guys, we're going to finish up the chapter today and we're going to plan to have the quiz tomorrow. And that's going to be on chapters 23 and 24, which is going to focus mostly on Cold War issues. So I'll give you a little bit of advice on how to study at the end of the video. But today we're going to finish up with the Johnson administration and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. So yesterday we talked about how Lyndon Johnson was already, before he rolls out the Great Society and before the election in 1964, before he wins that, he's already putting feelers out to see how America is going to feel about or respond to social programs that he had envisioned. So he had already declared war on poverty. He had already established the OEO. So he'd already rolled out some three-letter agencies, kind of like FDR had done. And now he's going to, after he wins the election, he's going to roll out what he's called the Great Society. And this is a massive grouping of about 60 plus governmental programs. That's a huge package of governmental programs. And we're talking mostly social programs. And these programs are aimed at equalizing economic opportunity and just kind of balancing the economic playing field. Now, we can debate about whether or not it's government's role to do that, but this is what Johnson's planning to do. So some of these 60 plus programs that he rolls out, Medicaid and Medicare, are programs that he rolls out in the medical field. And now America has always been resistant to government getting involved in medicine. We have had for a long time a medical free market until Medicare and Medicaid kind of are the first government involvement in the medical field. And then we're going to see Hillary Clinton actually under Bill Clinton. And she's not the first to roll out the idea of government aid with medicine or even government medical insurance or anything like that. But Hillary Clinton under Bill Clinton, she's going to roll out what's termed Hillary Care. And it's just shot down. People don't like this idea. And even with the Affordable Care Act under Obama, also known as Obamacare, a lot of Americans were very resistant to that. In fact, at the time of its passage, polls were showing that 57% of Americans didn't want it. But Congress passed it despite that, because Americans generally are very resistant to government involvement in the private sector. Well, LBJ is able to get Medicare and Medicaid through because it's not government involvement for everybody in healthcare. It's only government involvement or aid for those who are at risk, right? So Medicaid for those who are impoverished and Medicare for those who are elderly. So government is helping those who are economically disadvantaged. And so America's kind of okay with that. Now, there are some questions from the more conservative side of the field saying, should government be involved at all with helping, or is it more private sector that should be helping, like charitable institutions? But in general, that's one of the programs that he rolls out, and it still exists today, right? Medicare and Medicaid still exist today. Other things that LBJ did under the Great Society, so Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, LBJ rolls out educational legislation. So government funding goes to primary and secondary schools, so elementary and secondary, which would be 7 through 12 schools. So the federal government starts funding schooling and also establishes a Head Start program, which is a pre-K program, particularly aimed at those families that are disadvantaged or at risk. So those are three things that he's done. We're going to talk about two more specifically that he did with the Great Society. Another one that he did with the Great Society was addressing urban housing. So HUD is established and it's aimed at making housing affordable for those who are having difficulties paying for housing. And HUD still exists to this day. It still offers help for those who are impoverished or disadvantaged and are having trouble finding affordable housing. So this is something that starts back in the 60s that's still around in 2020. So we had talked about under FDR that Ronald Reagan, many, many years later, made the statement that the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program, and how some of FDR's programs that he started way back during the Great Depression are still around today. One example would be the TVA, or the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was established during the 30s, and it's still around today, managing dams and managing hydroelectric power in the Tennessee Valley region. So that's something that is kind of shown today as well with LBJ's programs. Many of them still exist today. So usually there are government programs that start and then they end. But a lot of times once government social programs are enacted, it's very difficult to unenact them. People don't like it. It's referred to as austerity. And I don't know if you know anything about the Greek economy over the past decade, or quite frankly longer than the past decade. But we'll just go back to the past decade. But the Greek economy, the economy in Greece has struggled. It's struggled a lot. It's not all that great. They've had issues with debt. They've had issues with not being able to fund all their social programs. They have a very early retirement age with benefits. And just in general, they've got a lot of social programs. And the debate has been, should Greek enact austerity, which is reducing social programs so that the strain on the overall economy and so that the governmental budget is decreased. Now, that can be a debate today when you look at our budget, where a lot of these social programs now are included in our budget, and a lot of our budget in America today goes to social programs. I think the stat's over 60%. I want to say it's around 66% of our budget goes towards social programs, but it's around 60% at least of our budget that goes toward things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other social programs. So the goal in this era is to help those who are impoverished, but the more social programs that are added, the bigger strain it becomes in the budget. And you see, starting back with FDR, and then also under LBJ, and anytime these social programs are expanded, the federal budget just skyrockets as far as what we need as a nation to pay our bills. And also our federal debt continues to rise largely, partially it's all deficit spending. Now, we can argue what causes deficit spending. I'm not here to do that today, but I'm just saying that the more that we spend, the bigger our budget gets. And you're seeing that under LBJ. But his goal is laudable. The goal is, let's help those who are less advantaged because the economy is booming in this era. Let's help out those who aren't experiencing the boom. So things like Medicare, Medicaid, education legislation, particularly aimed at those who are in impoverished areas, Head Start program, again, for those who are in impoverished areas, HUD, for those who are in impoverished area, let's help them with housing. And then we see the Immigration Act of 65, which is another part of the Great Society programs under LBJ. And it's taking away a lot of restrictions on immigration, and it's allowing for people to come into America from areas where they previously either were restricted or we gave preference to people in other areas. So now we're opening a much broader field internationally from which people can immigrate into America. So these are just some of the programs that LBJ had rolled out after the election of 64. And this is called the Great Society. And the idea behind the Great Society is helping those who are at risk or those who are impoverished. Now, your book gives, again, your book tries to be nice to everybody. And they're going to say this. This is a quote. In many ways, the impact of the Great Society was limited. Some programs did not work as hoped. All right, so they're saying that it didn't really work out as planned, and the overall goal wasn't necessarily met. And also, the big question that's debated today is how much of the reduction in poverty, because there was a reduction in poverty under LBJ. I think the poverty rate dropped from somewhere around 20% down to close to 12%, which is a big reduction in the poverty rate. But it's a short-term reduction. It's not a long-term reduction. And also the big question that's debated by historians is how much of that reduction in poverty is due to the booming economy and how much of that is due to LBJ's Great Society. And there's an argument about that, but generally, under a good economy, the poverty rate's going to decline. So the impact of this is largely limited, and that's your book's kind way of saying this wasn't very effective. So if we're making a comparison to Lyndon Johnson and to FDR, the Great Society and the New Deal, they both were unsuccessful economically, or at least marginally. They had limited success. But they both did provide morale boosts, and morale is a very important thing. I think we're seeing that even today, that keeping up morale is important, and it's just as important as economic health. And quite frankly, oftentimes as morale stays high, the economy will follow if the economy has decreased. But if the economy is low and morale is low, that's a big problem. And we're going to see that under the Carter administration as we move on in the book, dealing with low morale and a bad economy. But anyway, Great Society under LBJ, unsuccessful, and you can make that comparison to the New Deal. Unsuccessful, or at least it didn't achieve its goals and didn't really come close to achieving its goals, but it provided a morale boost. And it provided for more social and governmental programs. So it's continuing this trend of the government being more and more and more involved with trying to balance the economy. And some people are going to support that, and some people are not going to support that. And this is going to cause a political rift, or at least highlight a political rift that already existed. So the things I want you to get today: Lyndon Johnson, the Great Society aims at leveling the economic playing field. It had limited success, and the big question is how much of that success that the Great Society experienced was due to the booming economy and how much was due to government programs. All right, so that's it for the main part today. Now I just want to highlight, we've got the quiz coming out tomorrow. I'll send that out in the morning email. If I were you, I would focus on Cold War, particularly Cold War policies of presidents, and be able to compare and contrast those Cold War policies. I'll send out more specific details, but just to give you a jump on what you're looking at for the upcoming quiz tomorrow, I would focus on Cold War policies of the presidents. JFK is a really big one. Eisenhower and Truman we talked about as well. So study that, and then I'll send out specific study points in the morning email on Friday morning. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at any point in time. All right, I have a very fast turnaround time for my emails, so I should check it and get back to you really quickly. All right, guys, keep up the good work. I hope you're enjoying these videos and the lessons. I'm enjoying interacting with you through email and through the live chats and through the videos. So thanks again for all the hard work you're putting in. Keep it up.